we invested significantly in education and upskilling at all levels of the company. And not only did our senior leaders learn about AI, they learned about leading in the AI economy, and they also had a capstone project as senior leaders.
How fun. Hi, I'm Jayson Manship, host of Authentic and Agentic. Every week on this show, we break down what's happening in AI and what it means for how we work, lead, and live. Join me for a human-focused conversation that keeps you ahead of the curve. This is the Authentic and Agentic podcast on the IBJ Media Network. Hey friends, welcome back to Authentic and Agentic. I'm your host, Jayson Manship. This show sits at the intersection of technology, leadership, and responsibility. And today's episode's a big one. I'm really excited for you to hear my conversation with Tim and Thomas, the AI leaders at Eli Lilly. But before we get into that, I want to frame what's happening in more of the broader AI landscape, because I think it gives context to why this conversation matters. There are a few themes I'm watching closely right now. Every week, I try to cover some version of news or thought topics around AI so that folks that are listening to this podcast can tune in here and just kind of cut through the noise and hear about what I'm paying attention to and maybe what you should be thinking about every week. First, for me, is leadership and ethical tension inside of some of these AI tools and labs. Over the last few weeks, we've seen some pretty high-profile exits from some major AI companies. These are, in some cases, founders or safety researchers or senior engineers, and they're stepping away. They're leaving the company over disagreements around commercialization or safety or even long-term direction. And I think that's really interesting. It tells us that AI isn't just a technology race, but values and governance and how we use it really matters. When the builders themselves are wrestling with these guardrails, the folks that are creating the technology are trying to figure out where to stop. I think it really reinforces something we discussed with the folks from Notre Dame's Institute for Ethics and the Common Good. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, please do. Megan Sullivan and Adam Cronk, two philosophers that are leading the initiative inside of Notre Dame, are talking about AI ethics and how we have to design those in to our building. We can't just layer it on later. Ethics has to be core to what we do. Adam makes the point that we have to answer the question, to what end when doing this stuff? And I think a lot of the people that are building, using, and seeing this firsthand are starting to really push the envelope in answering that question. My second theme for today is that agentic AI is moving past just the chatbot and into real-world interfaces. And so most of you likely use ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot or one of these tools on a regular basis to impact your work, optimize your workflows, etc. But tools like Claude Cowork or OpenClaw, which is the open source tool you can install on your own computer, these are evolving into systems that don't just answer questions, but they actually take action. It's like having an AI employee that you give it things and it just goes and does it and comes back. These things execute workflows, they move files, they interact with other applications, they can monitor your email, your calendar, they can do all sorts of things for you, and they just sit there and they're ready, and they take it, they do action, right? So for me, this isn't theoretical. One of the things that I know is that folks listen to this podcast because they want to know how to build, they want to know how to think about some of this stuff. So I am actively building with these tools right now. I'm integrating them into my live operating agreements or environments. And in the coming weeks, I'll dedicate an episode to unpacking what I'm learning as I deploy these autonomous agents in the real world. I'm using them, and I'm going to be documenting how I do it, and I'm going to share it with you as an upcoming episode. Because I believe that once AI has hands and not just a mouth, oversight and structure matter a lot more. We have to be more thoughtful about, well, now it can do these things. What do I need to do to be more secure, more locked down, etc.? Which brings me to my third theme, which is governance. So I'm headed to a meeting later today with Governor Braun and the state legislators to talk about AI, not as a headline, but as infrastructure. Energy, utilities, healthcare, workforce, education, jobs. These are all things that AI is impacting now, not 10 years from now, but now. And I think it's really important that we push hard and have these conversations with the folks that are building the rules and regulations for our state. And so I'm headed down to the State House to have some conversations, and hopefully we can continue to get everyone thinking hard about how to build for this future we're going to see. On that note, pretty soon I'm going to be having members of ITIA. This is the policy group that I'm a part of that's putting this event on today. But I'm going to have some of these ITIA members together for a very serious conversation about how Indiana should think about this. We're going to do a collective Zoom call to talk about AI policy and frameworks. and how the state should be thinking about it, balancing innovation with responsibility. So I guess when you hear today's conversation, what I want you to listen to is ethics, execution, governance. These are the things that the folks at Lilly have given a lot of thought to. It's really interesting and really cool to hear how they've pushed forward with AI. These are the themes that are shaping AI right now. Eli Lilly's on the forefront of that. You're going to hear it come through in their message. So I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to listen to an ad from TechPoint, and then we'll jump into our interview with Tim Coleman and Thomas Fuchs at Eli Lilly. AI isn't just changing jobs, it's changing who gets hired. TechPoint's new brief, AI Amplifies the Need to Address the Experience Gap, shows how AI is changing entry-level jobs and how employers can take advantage of this moment. Download the brief and find out ways to get involved at techpoint.org/AI gap. Welcome back. I have the opportunity to sit down with two leaders from one of the most important companies in Indiana. And frankly, I think this is one of the most important companies in the entire world, Eli Lilly. My first guest, Tim Coleman. Tim's story is remarkable. He started at Eli Lilly as an intern. He spent 3 decades inside the organization. He was a graduate of IPS schools right here in Indianapolis. And today he serves as the Chief Technology Officer, helping guide the technological strategy of a global pharmaceutical powerhouse. And I think that arc really matters. It speaks to institutional knowledge, it speaks to long-term stewardship, and it speaks to deep cultural alignment. And in the world of AI, where everything's moving a million miles an hour, those things matter. My second guest is Thomas Fuchs. Thomas was brought into Lilly because of his deep machine learning and his AI expertise. When Lilly decided AI wasn't going to be a side project, but it was going to be a strategic part of their business, they brought in world-class talent to help evaluate, pressure test, and scale those efforts. And as we get into this conversation, you're going to hear their personalities come through. This is not formulaic. These folks are living and breathing this stuff. I'm laughing because when I first got to the Eli Lilly studio to record this, it's a little intimidating. It's certainly a little nicer than my studio, but they were very gracious and invited me in to record there. When I got there, Thomas informed me that I was violating the suit policy because I was dressed as I always do in a black polo. So it was pretty fun. But beneath that humor, I think, is something really powerful. We talk a lot on this show about how important AI is and how hard it can be to navigate some of these AI waters. This is a company operating at a global scale in one of the most regulated industries on the planet, and they are navigating AI exceptionally. They talk about how they evaluate risk, how they build internal capability, how they separate hype from value, and how they think about scaling responsibly. Now, I get it. All of us don't have Lilly-sized budgets, but I think we can learn from Lilly-sized thinking. And these two guys are here to share how they have built inside of Lilly using AI. Let's get into it. Hi, friends. Welcome to this week's Authentic and Agentic podcast. I have a special treat for you today. We are in the studio at the corporate center for Lilly, the medicine company. And I am thrilled for today's guests. As you guys know that listen to this regularly, this is a podcast all about AI. And I have two of the forefront leaders on AI here in our community and really, frankly, globally. And I'm really excited for today's conversation. And so Tim Coleman, Thomas Fuchs, thank you so much for joining me on today's conversation. Tim, I'm going to start with you. And then Thomas, if you want to jump in as well. So how did leadership get aligned that AI was going to be a strategic pillar for the company and not just something you bolt on?
Well, thanks, Jason, for having us. As a 150-year-old medicines company, Lilly has thrived through multiple technological ages over time. And we've done so through a constant focus on reinvention. And technology has been, it continues to be a critical superpower for the company. But now, kind of in this age of generative AI and large language models, our goal is to combine the best of human intelligence with artificial intelligence to address the most serious unmet medical needs. So it's a very exciting time. And I personally have seen multiple technology waves myself in 3 decades here with the company. But this one, I think the AI age is different. And I just think about the convergence of AI with our decades of proprietary pharmaceutical data. I'm talking about not just the successful experiments and the successful clinical trials, but also the failed ones.
Sure.
Together, that really creates an unprecedented opportunity for our company. So this is not just about adopting the latest and greatest tool. This AI age is about fundamentally changing. It's about reinventing how we discover, how we develop, and how we manufacture medicines to reach millions and millions of patients around the world. And importantly, Jayson, we are bullish about AI, not because of the hype, not because of the experience of others, but because of our early results and because of that opportunity that I just spoke to.
That's great.
So it's an exciting time.
It's for sure. Thomas, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so also very nice. Thank you, Jayson, for having us. It's really great to talk to you. Just the sheer fact that Lilly actually hired a chief AI officer already showed that the company is ready. And coming into Lilly 18 months ago, there was already so much work laid out, and all the work Tim put in over the last decades, and especially the recent years, was very, very surprising for me. And all of leadership, Dave Ricks, Diogo Rao, already prepared the organization for the next step. So I have actually quite an easy job here because everybody is ready and eager to get going. It's really just time to scale up and really permeate the whole organization, help with AI everywhere where we can in the whole pharmaceutical value chain, from drug discovery, as Tim said, but also in manufacturing, in commercial, in finance. There are all kinds of areas where we can, of course, use AI, employ AI, or develop our own foundation models to drive forward Lilly's agenda in producing medicines, and then, of course, ultimately impacting patients, which is a luxury to do, actually, with AI.
Sure. I don't know that I agree with your easy job to do part. I think you're navigating some pretty complex issues here, and I'm excited to double click on that and get a little deeper. So the decision was made at AI to lean into AI, to become an AI forward company. What were some of the structural moves organizationally, technologically, culturally? I've talked to a lot of folks in a lot of companies. There's no easy button. You don't just click it and magically we're an AI company. So can you, Tim, talk a little bit about that? How did the team kind of think about this globally?
So there were a number of things that we did, I think, to build the foundation for AI at Lilly. But if I had to really call out some of the most important ones, it would be three things. First, it would be experimentation. And just like we experiment with and we test new molecules for safety and efficacy through multiple phases of drug development, we are also now experimenting with AI technologies. We think about the phases a little bit differently, of course. We think about it as alpha, beta, early release, which is somewhat akin to a pilot, and then also general release. And I think the learning is it's important to test one's assumptions about the technology, what they do well, before you go to scale, before we deploy at scale. And believe it or not, the first 9 to 12 months of our AI journey was almost entirely about experimentation. Second area would be governance. We convened a group of senior leaders, including legal, ethics and compliance, multiple functions, to monitor the external environment, to kind of understand what was happening in terms of regulation and compliance. And together that helped to inform the development of safe policies and procedures for how we would use AI across the company. And then thirdly, big focus on education. We invested significantly in education and upskilling at all levels of the company.
Love that.
In fact, our CEO sponsored a very intensive AI education program for senior executives. We did this in partnership with Purdue University, the Daniel School of Business. And not only did our senior leaders learn about AI, they learned about leading in the AI economy. And they also had a capstone project.
As senior leaders.
As senior leaders.
How fun.
So they work with a tech buddy, and they had to propose a project that they would implement in their area. So this wasn't just an academic exercise. It actually required them to get hands-on, to really understand it deeply and think about how they would apply it within their own area. So again, a number of things we did from a foundational perspective, but experimentation, governance, education would be, I think, three of the more important areas.
Okay, very cool. Thomas, thoughts on that?
I think it's important to add that these are ongoing efforts. So education throughout the organization is on top of mind, and that's of course done on different levels, depending how deep the engagement is. At Tech at Lilly, everybody has to do actually very deep online machine learning courses to really understand the basics. Others in the organization are more trained in using tools in that area. And that, of course, also goes beyond language. Language is very important, but we build a lot of AI outside of language, molecular design, for example, or digital twins in manufacturing. So there's a lot to learn in that area, and that's an ongoing effort throughout the organization.
I have a hard time comprehending some of that. That's pretty cool just to even consider how complex it gets. So I think you guys are doing awesome stuff there. So Tim, you said something earlier about your data advantage. Thomas, I'm going to come to you on this question, but you said something about not just the decades of successes, but the decades of failure. And I think a lot of times leaders, tech folks don't like that term, right? We don't want to consider failures. And so when we think about that, how does that impact your AI decisions? I mean, you've got a lot of learnings, historical learnings to work off of. How does that impact it? And I guess what advice would you give to businesses earlier in their journey, maybe that don't have the goods and the bads to work from?
So I think what's key to understand is that machine learning and AI, when you really develop solutions yourself, as we do here at Lilly at different scale, it's the art of failing. You actually build models, you fail, you build models, you fail, you fail, you fail, you fail. And often after weeks or months, you have actually nothing to show than a better understanding of the underlying problem. So it's really the scientific loop put into practice. And that is exciting, but also challenging because it's, of course, a mind shift for many. It's different than building software, for example, or other products, because that failure has to really be part of your experimentation cycle. That's how you actually build solutions, but that's also how you make progress. And that's also how you end up building solutions that's very unique to your business and where you then actually also have a moat or an edge compared to anybody else, because it's not something off the shelf. But these learnings actually give you that edge to build very, very dedicated AI solutions that help you in all these areas we discussed.
That's awesome.
And maybe briefly to add on the failure side on the data, I think that's also very, very important. There's a little bit of a misconception out there that if you would just train a quote-unquote AI scientist based on all publications out there and all the books, you would have a magical being that can produce the next results. Right. And the fact of the matter is that even if you could do that or would do that, all the knowledge in all the publications is, of course, only a tiny fraction of what's out there. And that goes back to what you said, right? What's even more valuable here at Lilly are the millions and millions of experiments that failed. So we do not only know about the molecules that work, but we know about orders of magnitude more that do not work. And when you build AI on that, then you are much closer to reality, to biology, and you come up with models that are much more effective of what you want to do. So it's very important to learn from that. And that's true for all companies and the different areas who do that in that spaces, right? If you have a very unique data, that is the differentiation.
So yeah, it makes total sense.
And Jayson, I would assert that, out of respect for my data sciences colleagues,
sure,
it's not just about the algorithms. The algorithms are very important, but really it's the data that makes the difference. And I believe companies like Lilly, who are really focusing on how do we understand what data we have, how can we well manage our data and prepare for AI, those are the companies that are going to succeed and win in this new environment.
I know we were just at an event this week with TechPoint, one of the organizations I'm closely connected with, and that's the number one challenge a lot of companies have is, bad data in, bad data out, and they just don't have the data ready for the AI to do anything with it. So that's a really great point, Tim. So I want to talk about leadership and culture. Okay, I know that in any organization, anytime there's change, there's all kinds of perspectives on that change. You guys are a global company with a complex leadership structure. You've got a CEO, a CTO, a CAIO, large leadership structure, right? How do you manage leadership alignment and talent development and resistance when it comes to AI, right? Because any small company I've talked to, there's some people that are sprinting in and there's some people that are scared to death. And so I imagine for an organization like yours, that's a complex challenge to try to tackle.
So our priority in terms of AI adoption is really focused on three things: visibility, value, and also safety for our employees. And it's iterated over time. So we've been learning as we've gone. Visibility really speaks to making our AI products and our work with AI visible and accessible to as many employees as possible. And so early in our AI journey, we created an AI portal. We provided access on that portal to some of the products that we have, acquired from external sources, also some of the AI products that were developed internally. And not only has that helped in terms of adoption and people, using those tools, but it's also inspired learning. It's inspired shared learning across the organization. Secondly, we focused on value. This speaks to thinking about our AI ideas and solutions through the frame of real values. It's easy with a lot of these technology changes and technology trends to focus on what's bright and shiny,
Sure.
all of the bells and whistles. At the end of the day, we've got to deliver value for the business. I'd say part of that is also, Jayson, about recognizing projects and recognizing teams that are actually delivering
Love
value.
that.
And so
Love that.
the value and the visibility actually go hand in hand. And then lastly, safety. I mentioned this earlier, our work around governance and providing guardrails so that our employees can use the approved AI tools appropriately. And the analogy that I like to think about is, we can drive briskly on the highway because we're wearing seatbelts. I think that analogy applies in this case.
Yeah.
When we want to move quickly with AI, it's those guardrails that actually are enabler of speed.
That's great. Thomas, how do you feel about all that? You're newish to the company.
Yeah, we are certainly in interesting times. So I have a PhD in machine learning from a time when it was not cool yet. Largest,
It's always been cool.
oh, no. Back then, the largest international conference was 400 people. It was the most nerdy thing you could do. And doing healthcare within that was even more nerdy. So for most of my career, I had to shove down their ideas anybody else's throat to actually convince them to use AI. These days, of course, AI is it's like soccer. Everybody's talking about, but nobody's actually playing. So it's totally the other way around. So the reason why it's different at Lilly, and you see that also in our leadership, is that Lilly in its core, it's a scientific company. Science is the only thing that allows us to build molecules, to build medicines. And when reality hits you, and then no fluff, no selling or wording will help you. If the trial fails, if the molecule doesn't work, then reality is what remains after everything else is gone. So we have to be a scientific company at its core. And that's, of course, part of the culture throughout the whole leadership. That's why it's actually much easier to talk in very sober terms about AI and say, so that explain what's hype, what's fluff, what's BS, and what's real, where AI can really provide value, what's solid, where the future is going in our space. And it's much easier to communicate with a leadership that's used to science, scientific arguments, to probabilities of success, to taking actually risks, as every pharmaceutical company has to do when they bet on a molecule, then probably in other areas where companies are not that scientific and just try to use some off-the-shelf solution that's turn on and promises some magic. Right? So that grounding in science is what differentiates Lilly, and that's also why implementing AI here is probably more successful than in many other places.
I think that there's wisdom in both of those answers. Being visible, leaning into the things that are valuable, and building guardrails. I mean, that's on point for sure. And then I see a lot of companies that just jump to the tool first. They're like, oh, this shiny object will solve all my problems. And one of the things I hear a lot is that AI is ubiquitous now. It's kind of part of everything. You see it in all kinds of tools. And so there's a lot of options out there that try to solve all the problems. Right, but I think you guys are thinking about all of this in the right way. Let me ask a question about maybe the industry or the broader policy. So as I'm watching, I cover this every week. There's a global AI race happening, not just here in the U.S., but there is one leading here in the U.S. From your vantage point at the intersection of AI and medicine, biology, technology, what could America be doing around talent, around infrastructure, and around policy to lead in this moment?
So I'd say, Jayson, at a national level, some of the recent focus on investments in manufacturing and critical infrastructure really will strengthen economic competitiveness and position America to lead in AI-enabled science, also in next-generation biomedical or biotechnological manufacturing. But being a leader in this space also requires having the right regulations. And as you probably know, we operate across nearly every regulatory environment around the world, and the inconsistency is tremendous. And that's why we need robust global governance frameworks that will, help us be successful as companies while we are protecting the citizens of America. So that's why we regularly engage with policymakers. That's why we engage with industry working groups to help build the AI-ready infrastructure. And we are advocating for harmonized global standards for AI literacy in governments around the world, and also healthcare-specific AI, regulations that do two things. First and foremost, protect patients, but also do so without slowing scientific progress and innovation.
Great.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. On the regulation side, that's of course key. And I do think very complex AI systems that, for example, touch patients, right, should be, of course, regulated as medicines, for example. And it also differentiates the wheat from the chaff, right? Companies who focus on safety, efficacy, and making sure that your AI drugs or your AI systems work for everyone equally, these companies have then an edge, of course, over the ones who don't, right? Without regulation, you can just sell snake oil. We were there in the 19th century. There's a reason, of course, medicine is regulated, as should AI that actually impacts patients' lives. Then second point, globally, one reason we actually build our supercomputer here in Indianapolis is that we become more independent from the ups and downs globally, so we can control our own destiny. It's very important for a company of ours, and then we can also move faster in that direction. And lastly, you ask what we should do to stay in the lead. And the biggest part is, of course, education at all levels. Many countries globally start education on AI very, very early on, primary school and so forth. And we should do that in the right way, in a sober way, to explain how it's used, the same way kids use a calculator or other tools, right? And then, of course, through the whole career in school, at college, at university, we need the smartest people. And that does not mean only in AI. We need the smartest biologists who then use AI for their purpose, the smartest physicians and so forth. So the key is really to foster a fabulous education system to stay in the lead and also attract, of course, the best people across the globe. That was always the differentiator of America, and that's why we are in these leading positions. And that's, of course, something we have to push very, very hard, because you're right, it is a race, it is a competition, and it's not only hardware and GPUs and data centers. Right. At the end of the day, it's going to be the brains of the people who live in these countries. And we have to have the smartest people in AI and in all the areas that are going to use AI.
Okay. So last question for you all. On this one, I'm going to really zoom in on my audience in particular. So this is a lot of executives and leaders, primarily from Indiana and surrounding areas, but everyone that's listening to this probably doesn't have the footprint that Eli Lilly has. And so you have kind of been blessed with this huge organization, group, leadership to do all of this, right? You have teams that can lean into these places. If I am a leader that doesn't have those same resources, what are some hard-earned lessons that you might be able to share to encourage some of these folks? And let me maybe caveat that for just a second. I talk to folks that know they need to do something but don't know where to start. I talk to folks that, get a shiny tool and think it's something that they should just jump into. I'd love to understand what advice you might give to someone that just doesn't even know what to do next, but they know they need to do something.
So what I always recommend is start where your strengths are. AI is not going to solve your problems, but if you have a data advantage or experience advantage in your field, right, and that might be a technical one or social or in any different field, right? Lean on where you're really strong at, and then use AI specifically to augment that strength. And that will differentiate you from anybody else. Somebody that has only AI can do nothing against your company if you are expert in your field. That could be a plumbing company or whatever it is, right? And then put the right AI on top to accelerate what you do, be better in what you do, and it expand your advantage you have in these areas. And that also then takes away a lot of that anxiety, right, that people have, that, I don't know, somebody will just come up and completely unpaint your space just based on the chatbot. That will not happen, right? The companies that use AI in your field will succeed over the ones that don't, but the ones who only use AI will not do that, right? So lean in on your strengths and use AI to emphasize these.
Okay.
I wish we had time to talk about all of the learning.
Oh, I can only imagine, right?
Experience. There have been many of them, but as I reflect on the past few years, I think the number one learning that I would share with other leaders and executives is their engagement or executive sponsorship is non-negotiable.
Love that.
Our AI big bets succeed because we have sponsorship at the top of the organization, and the executive committee members themselves are the sponsors of our highest value AI initiatives. And the learning is, without the C-suite commitment and strategic alignment, AI initiatives really remained interesting technology experiments and pilots.
Yeah.
When the potential is for them to be business transformations that actually help to achieve the strategic objectives of the company. And so at Lilly, that's about improving speed and cycle time in R&D. It's about eliminating, simplifying, automating manual work in a lot of our operations areas across the company. It's about increasing manufacturing capacity and also efficiency in manufacturing. It's about accelerating patient reach and scale within our commercial units. And, at the end of the day, I give a lot of credit to Dave Ricks, to Diogo Rao, who have created the environment for innovation. They've helped to inspire receptivity to AI. And importantly, they brought funding to the table to actually help with experimentation. And that is what I believe helped to position us for scale implementation and scale value from that implementation over the past few years. And I think that sets us up well for the few years.
Yeah, you're definitely, if you're listening to the show, guys, there is so much wisdom in those last few points around how to take this technology that exists and apply it. And if you heard them say it's about creating value for the organization, it's not just about chasing the next shiny object. And so really grateful for you both for sitting down and joining us today. Thank you so much for your time. We're also just grateful, myself, my family, and everyone listening to this, for what Lilly does for this community. What an awesome organization to be a part of. And so thank you both for letting us come into your studio today. And thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you, Jayson.
Man, how fun was that? This was a really, really fun conversation for me. Tim and Thomas are just thought leaders in their space. They understand this world of AI and technology. And they're navigating stuff that you and I don't have to deal with. These guys are pushing boundaries. And it's really, really neat to see. As I said at the end of the interview, huge thanks to Lilly, to the foundation that they spun off for sponsoring organizations like Notre Dame's Institute. This company has had a outsized impact on Central Indiana. And you can tell that the leadership inside the company is thinking about the right things smartly. They're making calculated bets. They're thinking about the hard things. And they're building the right team to make it happen. And so again, thanks to Tim and Thomas for coming on. Thanks to the team behind them for helping make it a reality. As I kind of process that conversation, a couple things I think of. One, Lilly is designed to be successful in this moment because they think about the world through what I think they call the scientific method. It's been a long time since I've, had a chemistry class. But they are building hypotheses and they're testing those and they're seeing if it works. And they're willing to fail, and they're willing to fail a lot. I think tech startups live in that world. I think medicine companies live in that world. I'm not sure most of you listening to this podcast live in that world. I think we want to be right, and we want to be right every time. And that's just not a reality, especially in the world of AI. Guys, we are at the cutting edge of this stuff. And being willing to invest in it and lean into it isn't, hey, what tool do I use? How do I implement it and make me magically better? It's like being willing to lean in, being willing to fail, being willing to try something and realize, hey, that didn't work. Let's try something different. And so a lot of what I talk to folks about in AI is the mental changes. It's less about the technology. It's more about right sizing how you're thinking about it. And it's clear that Lilly is thinking about it correctly. A couple other notes that I just loved. Be willing to like put some time into it. Tim talked about how, a lot of these projects in the evaluation phase early take time. They're not just like turning it on and letting it go. And I think there's wisdom in that. I think building correctly is a really big deal. I also think that they got it right from the beginning in terms of getting executive sponsorship involved. I love the story he told about having executives partner up with tech-enabled folks and going and actually building with AI. I talk to a lot of companies and a lot of company leaders, and the CEO wants it, but doesn't really invest the time, effort, or energy into understanding it or empowering their team. That's a big deal. And I think we have to pay attention to that. And so if you are a leader in a company and you believe and see what I see, that AI is coming and you need to adapt to it at any type of company, you need to not just tell your team to go do it, but you need to be leaning in personally. And then if you are a team member, a worker bee, so to speak, inside of a company, and your leadership is putting pressure on you to, quote, AI-ify the thing, share this episode with them. I think hearing from Tim and Thomas about how a company like Lilly thinks about it might reframe their thinking and help get some corporate kind of sponsorship, some leadership buy-in from the top. And I think that's really valuable because really to move forward in this space, you all have to be aligned in how this works. And so again, thanks to these guys for coming on. What a great episode. I've got some really cool episodes coming up soon too. Next few episodes, I'm sitting down with Congresswoman Erin Houchin. She is on the House Energy Committee inside of the United States Congress, and she has some really interesting perspectives on power and water and all these sorts of things. And so we'll talk about that. I'm also going to share what I talked about in the news segment, some of how I'm using AI. So I have Claude Cowork. I have Claude Bot using OpenClaw on a local desktop, and I am building with it. And I can't wait to show you what I'm doing as a way to unpack the reality of this. And so the world's moving quick, guys. I appreciate you listening in. Please subscribe. Please share this with a friend. This was a really fun special episode for me. It's been just a blast talking to these folks and to hear from listeners like you. So subscribe, share, and we'll see you next week.